I stood at the entrance to the grand ballroom, smoothing down my mother-of-the-groom dress, when a wedding coordinator approached with a forced smile. "There had been a seating mix-up," she said. She led me through the kitchen doors. The bride appeared. Courtney looked at me and said, loud enough for the catering staff to hear, "The help eats in the kitchen." I saw my son Brandon look away. I pulled out my phone, dialed my CFO, and said clearly, "Cancel the Riverside contract. All $22 million. Brandon's face went white. My hand was still holding the phone when Brandon rushed toward me, his fingers wrapped around my arm, gripping tighter than he ever had before. The wedding coordinator stepped back, her eyes wide. Two servers carrying champagne trays froze mid-step. The kitchen, which had been filled with the organized chaos of a 200-person reception, went silent except for the hum of industrial refrigerators. "Mom, what did you just do?" Brandon's voice cracked. At 32 years old, my son suddenly sounded like he was 12 again, that same note of panic when he'd broken something valuable and knew there would be consequences. But this time, he was the one who'd broken something, my dignity, my place in his life. "You heard me," I said quietly, sliding my phone back into my clutch. "The Riverside contract is canceled." "You can't." He was shaking his head, his face flushed beneath his carefully styled hair. "Mom, that's my future. That's everything we've been planning. You promised." "I promised a lot of things, Brandon. I promised I'd always have your back. I promised I'd help launch your career. I kept those promises. Right up until your wife decided I was the help." Courtney appeared then, her white dress rustling as she pushed through the kitchen door. She'd been beautiful all day, I'll give her that. Honey-colored hair swept up in an intricate style, makeup flawless. The dress probably cost more than most people's cars. But her expression now was pure venom. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Brandon, guests are asking where you are. Your mother is causing a scene." "A scene?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. 40 years I'd spent building my commercial real estate company from nothing. 40 years since my husband died, when Brandon was 2 years old, leaving me with a toddler, a mortgage, and a dream. I'd worked 70-hour weeks. I'd missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I'd sacrificed everything to build something that would give my son opportunities I never had. And this woman, who'd known him for 18 months, was telling me I was causing a scene? "The Riverside contract," Brandon said to Courtney, his voice hollow. "She canceled it." I watched Courtney's face carefully. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered there. Not shock, calculation. Like she was running numbers in her head, figuring out her next move. It was the same look I'd seen on investors' faces when a deal went south. Then her face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, ruining her makeup. "Oh, Jaime, no, please. This is all my fault." I was joking. I have this terrible sense of humor. My friends always tell me I take things too far. She reached for me, pulling me into a hug I didn't want. Her voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "You just made a huge mistake, old woman." She pulled back, still crying, now playing to the kitchen staff who were watching. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please, it's my wedding day. Can't we just forget this happened?" Brandon was nodding eagerly. "See, Mom? It was a misunderstanding. Courtney didn't mean anything by it. You overreacted." The word hung in the air between us. Overreacted. I'd been humiliated, publicly dismissed as less than family, treated like hired help in front of strangers. But I'd overreacted. "Brandon," she told me to eat in the kitchen with the help. "It was a joke, Mom. A bad one, sure. But you embarrassed me on my wedding day, in front of everyone." He looked at the kitchen staff, then back at me. "I think you should leave." The knife twisted. Not Courtney asking me to leave, my son. "Fine," I said. I looked at Courtney, whose tears had already stopped now that she had what she wanted. "Congratulations on your marriage. I hope you both get exactly what you deserve." I walked out through the kitchen, past the servers who wouldn't meet my eyes, through the back hallway, and out to the parking lot. I didn't let myself cry until I was in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel. I'd meant to teach my son's wife a lesson about respect. Instead, I'd driven a wedge between myself and Brandon. But as I drove home through the spring evening, past the flowering dogwoods and azaleas that made our neighborhood beautiful, I couldn't bring myself to regret the call. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. Some humiliations shouldn't be tolerated. The Riverside contract had been my gift to Brandon. $22 million to develop a mixed-use commercial property downtown. He would have managed it, learned the business from the ground up, made his own fortune. I'd spent 6 months setting it up, calling in favors, structuring the deal so he'd succeed. Now it was gone. And so was I, apparently, from my son's life. The week after the wedding was the longest of my life. My phone stayed silent. No call from Brandon, no apology, no explanation, nothing. I went to work each day at my office downtown, the 30th floor of a building I'd developed 15 years ago. My business partner, Dorothy, watched me with worried eyes. "You need to eat something," she said on Thursday, setting a sandwich on my desk. Dorothy and I had worked together for 20 years. She was 63, sharp as a tack, and knew me better than almost anyone. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've lost 5 pounds this week. I can see it in your face." She sat down across from me. "Have you heard from him?" I shook my head. "Jaime, maybe you should reach out. Try to talk to him." "And say what? Sorry for not accepting being treated like garbage?" But even as I said it, I felt the guilt gnawing at me. He was my son, my only child, the person I'd built everything for. That afternoon, I made the call. Brandon answered on the 4th ring. "Mom." "Hi, honey. I thought maybe we could talk. Have lunch?" Silence. Then, "Will you reinstate the Riverside contract?" My heart sank. "Brandon, we need to talk first. About respect, about boundaries, about what happened." "So that's a no. That's a let's have a conversation." He sighed. "Fine. Tomorrow. Riverside Cafe. Noon." The irony of the restaurant name wasn't lost on me. I arrived early, chose a table by the window. Brandon showed up 10 minutes late, which wasn't like him. He'd always been punctual, something I'd instilled in him from childhood. He sat down, ordered coffee, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Courtney feels terrible," he started. "Does she?" "Mom, come on." She made a mistake. She's from a different background. Her family had money, but they cut her off when she married me. They thought I wasn't good enough because I didn't come from old money, so she's sensitive about class and status. The kitchen thing, it was her trying to make some kind of point about how we're all equal or something. It came out wrong. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe my son. Brandon, even if that's true, the way she spoke to me was cruel, and you didn't stand up for me. I froze. I admit it. I should have said something. He reached across the table. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really. I handled it badly. But you have to understand, this is my wife now. My marriage. I need you to try to get along with her." I felt myself softening. This was my boy. I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby, bandaged his scraped knees, helped him with homework, sent him to college. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I'd let my pride get in the way. "What if," I said slowly, "we reinstate a modified version of the contract? Something smaller to start. You prove yourself, then we scale up." Hope flashed across his face. "Really? But there have to be boundaries, Brandon. Courtney needs to treat me with respect, and you need to have my back when she doesn't." "Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Mom." He was grinning now, that smile that had always melted my heart. "I'll talk to Courtney tonight. We'll set up a dinner, the 3 of us, and we can work everything out." My phone buzzed on the table. My lawyer's name on the screen. "I'm sorry, honey, I need to take this." "Go ahead," I answered. "Mark?" "Jaime, I'm calling because I just received notification. Brandon filed a lawsuit against your company this morning. He's suing for $22 million, claiming the Riverside contract was a legally binding gift you had no right to cancel. There's a claim for additional damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. The filing came from Ashford and Associates." The world tilted. Ashford and Associates, Courtney's father's firm. "Mark, I'll call you back." I set the phone down carefully, looked at my son across the table. He was stirring his coffee, not meeting my eyes. "Did you file a lawsuit against me?" His jaw tightened. "Courtney's dad said we have a case. You made a verbal commitment in front of witnesses. Then you canceled it out of spite." "Out of spite. What else would you call it? You were mad about a joke, so you destroyed my future. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to talk to me, not sue me. Brandon, I'm your mother. And I'm your son, but you had no problem humiliating me at my wedding. Courtney's dad explained it to me. Legally, you breached a contract. You owe me that money. I stood up, my legs shaking. You want to know what you just did? You chose money over your mother. You chose that woman and her manipulative family over the person who raised you. Her manipulative family? They're the only ones treating me like an adult. You've always controlled me, Mom. Always. This is just you not being able to let go. I pulled 2 20s from my wallet, dropped them on the table for the coffee we hadn't touched. Good luck with your lawsuit, Brandon. You're going to need it. I walked out of that restaurant and didn't look back. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and finally let myself acknowledge the truth. My son wasn't just angry. He wasn't just manipulated. He'd calculated this. The lunch had been a setup. He'd already filed the lawsuit before we met. He'd been testing to see if I'd fold without legal pressure. He'd learned that move from me. I taught him to be strategic in business. I just never thought he'd use it against me. 2 weeks later, my sister Patricia called. I'm having a birthday dinner Saturday night. Small family thing. Please come. I haven't seen you since the wedding. Patricia was 65, 2 years younger than me. We'd been close as children, but my business success had created distance between us. She'd married young, had 3 kids, stayed home. She'd always thought I worked too much, cared too much about money. But she was family, and right then I needed family. I'll be there, I said. I should have known something was wrong when I arrived and saw Brandon's car in the driveway. Patricia's house was full. Her husband, her 3 kids, and their spouses, her 4 grandchildren running around. And there, in the living room, sitting on the couch like honored guests, were Brandon and Courtney. They'd gotten there first. That much was obvious from the body language in the room. Everyone looked uncomfortable when I walked in. Patricia hugged me, but it was stiff, awkward. Glad you could make it, she said. Courtney stood up immediately. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Jamie, I'm so glad you're here. I've been wanting to talk to you. The family gathered around as Courtney launched into her performance. And it was a performance, I realized, watching her. Every word, every tear, every gesture was calculated. I can't stop thinking about the wedding, she said, her voice breaking. I was so nervous that day. Brandon's family means everything to him, and I wanted you all to like me. I have this stupid sense of humor where I say things that come out wrong. The kitchen comment, I swear I was trying to make a joke about how we're all family, how there's no hierarchy. It came out terrible. I felt sick about it ever since. Patricia was nodding sympathetically. Her daughter, my niece Sarah, put an arm around Courtney. And then when Jaime canceled that contract, Courtney continued, it wasn't just about the money. It was about Brandon's dream. He's worked so hard to prove himself in the real estate business. That contract was supposed to be his chance to show what he could do. And it got taken away because I made a stupid joke. It wasn't just a joke, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. She deliberately humiliated me. She had me seated in the kitchen and told me that's where the help eats. I made a mistake. Courtney was crying harder now. I apologized. But nothing I do is good enough for Jaime. She's holding this grudge, and now Brandon and I are suffering. We had to file a lawsuit just to try to get what was promised to Brandon. It's tearing our marriage apart. Patricia's husband, Gerald, spoke up. Jamie, couldn't you have just laughed it off? Was it really worth all this? Laughed it off? I stared at him. She treated me like hired help at my own son's wedding. But she apologized, Patricia said gently. Honey, I know you've worked hard your whole life. I know you've sacrificed. But sometimes you have to let things go. Brandon is your only child. Is your pride really worth losing him? Before I could answer, Brandon stood up. I don't think Mom knows how to let go. Of me, of control, of anything. She built this whole empire, and now she expects everyone to bow down to her. When someone doesn't, she punishes them. That's not fair, I started, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Isn't it? You've always controlled every aspect of my life. Where I went to college, what I studied, who I dated. Courtney is the first thing I chose for myself, and you can't stand it. My former sister-in-law, Brandon's aunt from his father's side, joined in. Maybe Brandon's right, Jaime. I remember how you were when Tom was alive. Always working, always busy. Poor Tom raised Brandon more than you did those first few years. Maybe you're holding on too tight now because you feel guilty about then. The words hit like physical blows. I'd heard variations of this before, the working mother guilt, but never from family. Never thrown at me like weapons. I worked to provide for my son, I said. After Tom died, I worked to make sure Brandon had everything he needed. Everything but a present mother, Brandon said. The room went quiet. Even the children stopped playing. Courtney stood up, walked over to Brandon, and took his hand. Then she turned to face everyone, and I saw it. The triumph in her eyes. Just for a second, before she schooled her expression back to sorrowful. I have some news, she said softly. I wasn't going to say anything yet, but given everything that's happening, I think it's important for family to know. She looked down, then up, tears shining. I'm pregnant. The room erupted. Patricia screamed with joy. Sarah and her sisters rushed to hug Courtney. Gerald was clapping Brandon on the back. Suddenly, there was champagne being poured. Even though it was supposed to be Patricia's birthday, we were celebrating. I stood there, watching my family celebrate with the woman who'd humiliated me, watching my son accept congratulations while he was actively suing me. Patricia came over, grabbed my hands. A grandbaby? James? Aren't you excited? Of course, I managed. Courtney looked directly at me. I really hope Grandma will be part of our baby's life. I want that so much. If we can all just learn to respect boundaries and move forward. The manipulation was brilliant. Now, if I continued fighting, I wasn't just fighting Brandon and Courtney. I was keeping myself from my grandchild. Patricia pulled me aside a few minutes later. You need to fix this. Drop the lawsuit defense. Give Brandon what he's asking for. Don't lose your grandchild over pride. He's suing me, Patricia. I'm not suing him. But you started it by canceling that contract. Look, I love you, but sometimes you're too stubborn for your own good. Swallow your pride. Be the bigger person. That baby needs a grandmother. I left the party early, claiming a headache. No one tried very hard to make me stay. As I drove home, I realized what had happened. Courtney and Brandon hadn't just turned my son against me. They'd turned my entire family against me. And the pregnancy announcement, perfectly timed, had given them the ultimate leverage. I thought about calling Dorothy, but what would I say? That I was losing everything? That the empire I'd built meant nothing if I had no one to share it with? Instead, I went home to my empty house and sat in the dark, wondering how I'd gotten here. The lawsuit consumed the next month of my life. Discovery phase, they called it. Both sides gathering evidence, taking depositions, building their cases. My lawyer, Mark, was good but increasingly worried. Ashford and Associates is a powerful firm, he told me in his office. They have connections to several judges in this jurisdiction. And they're playing hardball. They're not just going after the contract money. They're trying to paint you as an unfit business partner who promised Brandon equity he never received. That's ridiculous. Brandon is 29 years old. He doesn't have the experience yet for full partnership. They're arguing you've been stringing him along for years, using him for labor without proper compensation. I felt my blood pressure rising. I've paid him a generous salary. I've given him opportunities. The Riverside contract was going to be his big break, which you canceled, in front of witnesses, because you were angry, because I was humiliated. Mark leaned back in his chair. I'm not judging you, Jaime. I'm telling you how a jury will see it. Successful businesswoman, worth tens of millions, cancels a contract with her son because of a comment from his wife. It looks petty. So what do? We build our case. Show that the contract wasn't legally binding, just a proposal. Demonstrate that you had sound business reasons for canceling. But Jaime? He looked at me seriously. This is going to get ugly. They're deposing you next week. They're going to ask about your relationship with Brandon, your parenting, everything. Are you prepared for that? I wasn't. Nothing could have prepared me for sitting in a conference room while Courtney's father asked me questions designed to make me look like a cold, absent mother. Is it true you missed Brandon's 8th grade graduation? I was closing a deal in Atlanta. I explained to him, yes or no, please. Did you miss it? Yes. And his high school soccer championship? I had a board meeting I couldn't reschedule. How many of his soccer games did you attend? I don't remember exactly. More than 5? I don't know. More than 3? The questions went on for hours. Every missed birthday party, every school event I'd skipped, every time I'd chosen work over being present. They painted a picture of a woman who cared more about money than her child. Brandon's deposition was worse. I read the transcript later, alone in my office. Would you describe your mother as warm and affectionate? Not particularly. She was always working. Did she tell you she loved you? Sure, but it felt hollow, like something you're supposed to say. When you were growing up, did you feel like a priority in her life? I felt like a project, something she was managing alongside her real estate deals. Each word was a knife. Dorothy found me crying at my desk that night. He's being manipulated, she said firmly. That girl and her father have gotten in his head. Or he's telling the truth. Maybe I was a terrible mother. Maybe this is all my fault. Stop it. Dorothy rarely used that tone with me. You raised that boy alone. You worked your tail off to give him opportunities most kids only dream about. You weren't perfect, but you did your best. And right now, he's throwing that back in your face because some woman convinced him he was a victim. There's something else, I said. I pulled up the documents Dorothy had found earlier that week. He's been sharing confidential company information with Ashford and Associates. Our internal documents on the Riverside deal, our financial projections, everything. Dorothy had discovered it by accident, noticing that Brandon had accessed files he shouldn't have had clearance for. He'd downloaded proprietary information and handed it to his lawyers. That's theft, Dorothy said. That's actually criminal. That's my son. But worse news was coming. Mark called 3 days later. They found something. Or they claim they did. Medical records they subpoenaed through the court. What medical records? Theirs. Specifically, prenatal care records. Or the lack thereof. Our team noticed there were no OB appointments scheduled, no prenatal vitamins prescribed, nothing you'd expect to see for a woman claiming to be 8 weeks pregnant. My heart jumped. So she lied about being pregnant? We don't know. We tried to subpoena more detailed records, but their lawyers blocked it, claiming medical privacy. And Jaime, here's the problem. Now it looks like you're so vindictive you're trying to disprove your daughter-in-law's pregnancy. The optics are terrible. He was right. The local legal community was small. Word got around. I started hearing whispers. Did you hear about Jaime Winston? Fighting with her son over money. Actually tried to prove his wife wasn't really pregnant. What kind of person does that? Then Dorothy brought me the final blow. Brandon and Courtney are shopping the Riverside property to other developers. What? They're using your original plans, the ones Brandon copied from our files. They're presenting them as their own work, trying to secure funding from other sources. If they get it, they can claim they never needed you in the first place. It strengthens their lawsuit and makes you look petty for canceling. I stared at the evidence she'd compiled. My work, my plans, my vision, being stolen by my son and presented as his own. We could sue for theft of intellectual property, Dorothy said. And look even worse. Mother sues son for using business plans she was supposedly giving him anyway. I laughed, but it came out bitter. They've thought of everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brandon as a little boy, how he'd crawl into bed with me after nightmares, how he'd beg me to read just one more story, how he'd hug me goodbye on his first day of school, then run back for one more hug. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into someone who could do this to me? Or had I turned him into this? Had my absences, my focus on work, my need to provide, made him into someone who measured love in dollars and saw relationships as transactions? At 3 a.m, I drove to the cemetery where my husband was buried. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him for the first time in years. I don't know what to do, Tom. I thought I was doing right by him. I thought building the business was building his future. But maybe everyone's right. Maybe I should have been home more. Maybe I should have chosen differently. The stone didn't answer. The dead never do. I sat there until dawn, then drove home to shower and face another day of legal warfare with my own child. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks after the deposition. In that time, things somehow got worse. The judge ruled partially in Brandon's favor. Preliminary injunction, they called it. It required me to place $22 million in an escrow account pending the final trial outcome. $22 million, locked away, untouchable. It was a catastrophe. That capital was supposed to be working. I had other projects in development, other commitments. Having it frozen meant pulling back from 2 major deals. Word spread fast in the commercial real estate world. Jaime Winston was having financial troubles. Jaime Winston was in a lawsuit with her son. Maybe Jaime Winston wasn't as stable as everyone thought. 2 investors pulled out of separate projects, citing concerns about my ability to fulfill obligations. One of them told me privately, "I can't invest with someone who can't even manage their own family." What does that say about their business judgment? Dorothy came to my office on a Thursday evening and sat down with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news. "I think you should consider settling," she said. "What?" $5 million. Offer them $5 million. Walk away from the rest. This is destroying you, Jaime. You've lost 12 pounds. You're not sleeping. The business is suffering. At some point, you have to ask yourself what you're really fighting for. I'm fighting for the principle. I can't let them bully me into. They're already bullying you. They're winning. Look at what this has cost you already. Your family relationships, your reputation, your health, your business stability. Is being right worth all that? I wanted to argue, but I looked at my reflection in the office window. She was right about the weight loss. I looked gaunt, older than my 67 years. There were dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide anymore. That weekend, I visited Tom's grave again. I'd been going more often lately, finding strange comfort in talking to him. "Dorothy thinks I should settle," I told the headstone. "Give them some money, end this nightmare. Part of me wants to. I'm so tired, Tom. I'm so tired of fighting." I thought about Brandon as a baby, how he'd fit perfectly in the crook of my arm, how his little hand would wrap around my finger. I'd promised Tom, the day he died, that I'd take care of our son, that I'd make sure he had every opportunity, that he'd never want for anything. I'd kept that promise. I'd worked myself to exhaustion keeping it, and somehow it had brought me here, to a place where my son saw me as an obstacle to destroy rather than a mother to love. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Is this Jaime Winston?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes. My name is Diane. You don't know me, but I know Courtney. Your son's wife. I need to send you something. Can I have your office address?" "Who are you?" "Someone who's been where you are. Please. Just trust me." She hung up before I could ask more questions. I almost dismissed it as a crank call, but the next Monday, a package arrived at my office. Plain brown envelope, no return address. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed photographs, and a burner phone with a single number programmed in. The news clipping was from 5 years ago. Local couple calls off engagement. The accompanying photo showed Courtney, younger but unmistakably her, with an older man. The article mentioned that the engagement had ended due to irreconcilable differences regarding family financial arrangements. The photographs were more recent. Courtney with a different man, someone who wasn't Brandon. The photos were dated 3 weeks before the wedding. They were embracing, kissing, looking very much like a couple. I called the number on the burner phone. "You got the package." It was Diane. "Who are you?" "I'm the sister of the man Courtney was engaged to before. She did to my family what she's doing to yours. My brother was wealthy, vulnerable. His mother had just died. Courtney swooped in, convinced him his family didn't support him, isolated him from everyone. When his father wouldn't give her control of the family trust, she broke off the engagement. But not before she'd extracted a $100,000 settlement by threatening to sue for breach of promise." My hands were shaking. The man in the photos? Her real boyfriend, has been for years. She uses wealthy, vulnerable men to extract money, then moves on. Your son's money, your money specifically, was supposed to be her biggest score yet. Why are you telling me this? Because she destroyed my family. My brother never recovered. He's paranoid now, doesn't trust anyone, refuses to date. My father spent his last years fighting her legally. It killed him. Literally. Heart attack from the stress. I've been watching for her next victim. When I saw your son's wedding announcement, I started investigating. I have to show this to Brandon. Wait. Diane's voice was sharp. "If you use this wrong, it'll backfire. She'll claim you're making it up, that you're desperate. Her father will bury this evidence. You need to be strategic." I took the package to Mark the next morning. He looked through everything, his expression growing grimmer. "This is good evidence," he said finally. "It establishes a pattern of behavior. But Diane's right. If we introduce this in court, we look desperate. Character assassination. And it doesn't actually address the legal question of whether you had the right to cancel the contract. So what good is it? I don't know yet, but don't destroy it. It might matter later." That night, I sat in my home office, looking at those photographs. Courtney smiling at another man. Courtney kissing him. Courtney, who'd stood in my sister's living room and announced her pregnancy, making my entire family complicit in pressuring me. I had proof she was a fraud, and I couldn't use it. The irony was suffocating. I'd spent 40 years in a business where information was power, where knowing the right thing at the right time could make or break a deal. And now I had information that could save me, but using it would destroy me. Dorothy found me still sitting there at midnight. "Go home," I said. "You don't need to stay. I'm not leaving you like this." She sat down across from me. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Mark says using this makes me look vindictive. Not using it means I lose everything. There's no good choice." "There's always a choice." Dorothy had been my friend for 20 years. She'd seen me through my husband's death, through the hard early years of building the business, through every triumph and setback. The question is what you're really fighting for. If it's just money, settle. If it's your son, then you need a different strategy. What strategy? That's what you need to figure out. Because right now, you're fighting to be right. But being right and being free are two different things. She left me alone with that thought. I looked at the photos again. At Courtney's face, so different when she thought no one was watching. At my son, who I'd raised to be better than this, who'd somehow become someone I didn't recognize. And I realized Dorothy was right. I wasn't fighting for money. I wasn't even fighting for respect anymore. I was fighting to save my son from a woman who would destroy him. The question was, how to do that without destroying myself in the process. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to figure out how to win a game where every move seemed designed to make me lose. I hired a private investigator. His name was Gregory. He'd worked corporate fraud cases for 20 years, and he cost a fortune. I didn't care. If I was going to go down, I was going down with all the information. "I need to know everything about Courtney," I told him. "Legally obtained. Nothing that can be thrown out of court." Gregory worked fast. Within a week, he had details that made Diane's package look like the tip of an iceberg. Courtney's wealthy family story was partially fiction. Her parents had money, sure, upper, middle class, comfortable, but not the old money dynasty she'd described. And they hadn't cut her off. She'd cut them off after they refused to fund her lifestyle aspirations. There had been 3 previous wealthy boyfriends before the engagement Diane had told me about. Each relationship had ended with financial settlements. Small enough to avoid attention, large enough to keep her comfortable. But the most damning information was about the man in the photos. His name was Derek. He'd been Courtney's boyfriend for 4 years. They'd never broken up. The wedding to Brandon was purely strategic. Brandon had something Derek didn't: access to serious money through his mother. Gregory got surveillance footage of Courtney meeting Derek twice since the wedding, once for coffee, looking carefully around before kissing him goodbye, once at a hotel. "The question is what you want to do with this," Gregory said, laying out the evidence on my desk. I thought about it all night. Thought about showing Brandon, forcing him to see what his wife really was. But I knew him. Knew the stubborn Winston pride he'd inherited from me. If I showed him this now, he'd claim I'd fabricated it. Courtney would spin some story. Her father would bury the evidence in legal objections. Then I started thinking differently. Strategy. What did Courtney really want? Not Brandon, not love, money. What would she do if she suddenly had access to money without having to stay married to my son? I called Dorothy at 6 a.m. "I have an idea," I said. "It's crazy. It might not work, but I think it's the only way to save Brandon." "I'm listening." I told her my plan. She was quiet for a long moment. "You'd really sacrifice that much?" To save my son from that woman? Yes. Even if he never knows? Even if he thinks you just gave up? I looked at the photo on my desk. Brandon at his college graduation, his arm around me, both of us smiling, back when things were simpler. Even then, the trial was set for Monday morning. I showed up in my best suit, hair perfect, makeup covering the exhaustion. Mark had prepared me for everything, the questions, the attacks, the strategy. Brandon and Courtney were already there. Brandon looked nervous. Courtney looked confident, her hand on her still flat belly, playing the pregnant wife. But I wasn't looking at them. I was watching the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting. At 9:15, 15 minutes before we were scheduled to begin, I saw them. Courtney and Derek, standing in an alcove 30 feet away, visible through the glass walls. They were arguing. I could see Derek's angry gestures, Courtney trying to calm him down. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Derek's voice carried. "You said after you got the money from the old lady we'd be done with this." Courtney's response was quieter, but my phone picked it up. "We will be. Just shut up until this is over. Then we're home free." I had it. Irrefutable proof, recorded in a public space, completely legal. My finger hovered over the stop button. Then I thought about what would happen next. I'd show Brandon. He'd be devastated, humiliated. His marriage would explode in the most public way possible. He'd be the guy whose wife played him for money. It would destroy him. Or I could do something else. I walked into the courtroom. Mark saw my face and knew something had changed. "What happened?" "Change of plans," I said quietly. "When the judge comes in, I'm offering a full settlement." "What?" "Jaime, we have a strong defense now. With the evidence Gregory gathered, I'm settling. Everything they asked for. $22 million, plus Brandon gets the Riverside contract outright, plus damages. All of it." Mark stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "That's financial suicide." "Maybe, but it's what I'm doing. Draw up the papers." The judge came in. Before any proceedings could start, I stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess. My son and I need to discuss a settlement." Brandon looked shocked. Courtney's face showed something else. Calculation. She knew what a settlement meant. Immediate money. Today. We went into a conference room. Brandon, Courtney, their lawyers, me, and Mark. "I'm prepared to offer everything you asked for," I said, looking at Brandon. $22 million. The Riverside contract, transferred entirely to your name. $5 million in additional damages. All of it. We can sign the papers today. Mom, what Brandon started, but Courtney cut him off. "We accept," she said quickly. "Courtney, wait," Brandon said. "Mom, why are you doing this?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw the confusion in his eyes, the part of him that was still the boy who'd hugged me goodbye on his first day of school. "Because I'm tired, Brandon. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being estranged from you. I'm tired of all of it. You want the money? Take it. Just please, can we try to rebuild some kind of relationship?" I saw something flicker in his face. Doubt, maybe. Or guilt. But Courtney was already talking to her lawyers, making sure the settlement was ironclad. Papers were drawn up. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of lawyers arguing over language, over terms, over conditions. Finally, everything was ready. I signed. Brandon signed. It was done. $27 million. Gone. Just like that. Courtney couldn't hide her smile. "Thank you, Jaime. This means so much to us, to our future, to our baby." Our baby. The baby I knew, from Gregory's investigation of their medical records, didn't exist. Brandon walked me out to the parking lot. "Mom, I don't understand. Why did you just give in?" "Sometimes you have to know when to let go," I said. "I love you, Brandon. I always have. I haven't always shown it the right way, but it's true. I hope you'll be happy." I drove home, called Dorothy, and said 2 words. "It's done." "Are you okay?" "Ask me in a week." That week was the longest of my life. Waiting. Wondering if my gamble would pay off, or if I'd just handed $27 million to the people who'd destroyed my relationship with my son. Then, 6 days after the settlement, my phone rang. Brandon's name on the screen. "Mom." His voice was shaking. "Mom, can you come over?" Please, right now. What's wrong? Please, just come. I drove to the apartment he and Courtney had rented with settlement money, a luxury high-rise downtown, expensive cars in the garage, everything they'd supposedly wanted. Brandon met me at the door. His eyes were red. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 days. She's gone, he said. What? Courtney. She's gone. She took $15 million from our account and disappeared. I tracked her to the airport. She got on a plane with some guy. Her boyfriend, apparently. They're in Belize. No extradition. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I just felt sad. Brandon, I'm so sorry. The Riverside contract, he continued, his voice hollow. I finally actually read the whole thing. All the fine print. The environmental assessments required. The zoning complications. The debt obligations. Mom, I can't manage this. I don't have the expertise or the connections. Without you, it's worth nothing. It's actually going to cost me money I don't have. He looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in months. You knew, he said. You knew she'd take the money and run. That's why you settled. I didn't confirm or deny it. Just waited. I'm so sorry, Mom. God, I'm so sorry. What I did to you, what I said, the lawsuit, all of it. I was so stupid. She got in my head and I let her. I let her turn me against you. Brandon. No, let me finish. You were right about everything. The kitchen thing, it wasn't a joke. It was a test. She was testing to see if I'd choose her over you. And I did. I chose wrong. He was crying now, real tears. She was never pregnant. There was never a baby. That was just another manipulation, and I used it against you. I threatened to keep your grandchild away from you when there was no grandchild. What kind of person does that? A person who was being manipulated, I said quietly. You don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, but you have it anyway, because you're my son. That doesn't change. He broke down then, completely. I held him while he cried, this 32-year-old man who'd once been my baby boy. The next weeks were complicated. Brandon had to face the consequences of his choices, and I let him. That was important. He'd made this mess. He needed to feel the weight of it. The Riverside contract was indeed a disaster without proper management, but I had the expertise to navigate those problems. I helped him, but I didn't rescue him. He had to do the actual work. Fill out the forms, meet with the zoning board, hire the environmental consultants. I advised. He executed. He lost money. Not all of it, but enough to hurt. Enough to understand that shortcuts and easy money come with a price. We had dinner every Sunday. At first, it was awkward, painful. We talked about safe things, work, the weather, anything but the lawsuit, the wedding, Courtney. But slowly, we started having real conversations. He told me about feeling inadequate growing up, how he'd resented my success because it made him feel small, how he'd wanted so badly to prove himself that he'd been vulnerable to someone who promised him shortcuts to success. I told him things I'd never said before. About the guilt I'd carried for all those missed events. About the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was failing him. About how building the business wasn't about the money, it was about creating something that would outlast me, something I could leave him. I thought the business was more important to you than I was, he admitted one night over dessert. It was never more important. It was for you. Everything I built was for you. I know that now. I'm sorry it took me so long. Dorothy met with us both one afternoon at the office. She looked at Brandon seriously. You hurt her. Badly. You sued your mother, stole from the company, and let that woman manipulate you into betraying the person who sacrificed everything for you. I know, Brandon said quietly. I'm not done. You want to make this right? You want to earn your way back into this company? Then you work. Entry level, no special treatment. You learn this business from the ground up, the way your mother did. You prove you understand what it means to build something, instead of expecting it handed to you. I will. Good. Because we don't have room for people who take shortcuts. We build things that last. If you're not willing to do that, there's the door. Brandon took the job. I watched him over the following months. Really watched. Not with the distraction of running an empire, but with the focus of a mother who'd almost lost her son. He worked hard, showed up early, stayed late, asked questions, made mistakes, and learned from them. Slowly, painfully, he started to understand the business. Not the fantasy version where wealth appears magically, but the real version. The tedious contracts, the difficult negotiations, the calculated risks. The family situation took longer to heal. Patricia called, apologetic, after she learned the truth about Courtney. "I should have believed you," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't." "You didn't know. I should have trusted you. You're my sister. Instead, I let that girl manipulate me into turning against you. I forgave her because she was family. But I also set boundaries. I wouldn't be guilted into decisions anymore. I wouldn't be made to feel unreasonable for demanding respect. My relationships with extended family would be on my terms." Diane called me 6 months later. "I heard Courtney's in trouble. Apparently Derek got arrested for fraud in Belize. Courtney's trying to claim she was an unwitting accomplice." "That's not my problem anymore," I said. And I meant it. The Riverside situation eventually resolved. Brandon managed to complete the project with my guidance. It made a modest profit. Nothing spectacular, but honest work producing honest results. One Sunday evening, almost a year after the wedding, Brandon and I were having dinner at my house. He was telling me about a new project he was considering, asking my opinion on the market analysis. "Mom," he said suddenly, interrupting his own pitch, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day at the courthouse, when you settled, you knew what Courtney was, didn't you? You had evidence." I didn't answer right away. Took a sip of wine, thought about what to say. "I had information," I said carefully. "You could have used it. You could have fought and won, exposed her. Instead, you gave her exactly what she wanted. Why?" I looked at my son. "Because exposing her wouldn't have saved you. You would have felt humiliated, manipulated. You wouldn't have learned anything except that your mother was right and you were wrong. That wouldn't have helped either of us. So you let her take $27 million. I invested $27 million in your future, in teaching you a lesson you could only learn by experiencing the consequences. Money I can make back. You, I can't replace." Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most expensive lesson anyone's ever taught. It was worth every penny. You're here. You're learning. You're becoming the man I always knew you could be. That's priceless." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Brandon said, "I looked up the details on that Riverside contract, the way you structured it, the liabilities, the complications. You built those in on purpose, didn't you? You knew if I tried to manage it without your help, I'd struggle." I smiled. "I'm a businesswoman, Brandon. I always have a strategy. You're devious. I prefer the term strategic." He laughed, really laughed. It was good to hear. 6 months after that conversation, Brandon came to me with a proposal, a small development project he'd put together himself. The research was solid, the numbers made sense, the risk was calculated. It was good work. "I'd like to do this," he said, "with your blessing, not your money. I've saved up enough for the down payment. I'll get my own investors, but I'd like your advice along the way. You have my blessing, and my advice, whenever you need it." He succeeded with that project. Not spectacularly, but solidly. Built a small mixed-use building, managed it well, made a reasonable profit. He did it himself, and that made it mean something. One evening, I drove to the cemetery. Hadn't been there in months. I sat by Tom's grave in the fading light. "I think we did okay," I told him. It was messy, expensive, painful, but our boy is going to be all right. He learned that shortcuts don't work, that real success comes from actual work. That family is more important than money, even when family is imperfect. The stone didn't answer, but I felt at peace anyway. I thought about that moment in the kitchen at Brandon's wedding, standing there in my dress, being told I was the help. It felt like a lifetime ago. In some ways it was. That version of me had died in that moment. She'd been replaced by someone harder but also softer. Someone who'd learned that being right isn't the same as being wise. I'd lost $27 million. I'd gained my son back. In the end, it was the best deal I'd ever made. The business recovered. I'm semi-retired now, letting Dorothy manage more of the daily operations. Brandon is a junior partner, earning his way up. In another 10 years, if he keeps working like he has been, the company will be his. He'll have earned it. That matters. Sometimes I see Courtney's photo in the news. She married someone else, another wealthy man. I feel sorry for him, but it's not my problem anymore. I learned something through all of this. Something I wish I'd understood earlier. You can't protect people from making mistakes. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them fail, then helping them get back up. Not rescuing them from consequences, but standing beside them while they face those consequences. That's what love looks like in the real world. Not perfect protection, but imperfect presence. My sister asked me recently if I regretted the way I handled things. If I wished I'd fought harder in court, exposed Courtney publicly, tried to protect Brandon more. No, I said. I made the only choice I could live with. Not the easy choice, or the cheap choice, or the one that made me look good, but the choice that gave my son a chance to become who he was meant to be. That's enough for me. So I guess the question I'd ask you is this. When someone you love is making a terrible mistake, do you fight to save them from themselves, or do you step back and let them learn? It's not an easy question. There's no perfect answer, but it's worth thinking about. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family relationships and the complicated balance between protection and freedom, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to make a hard choice between being right and being wise? How did you handle it? And if you found value in this story, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel for more stories about family, resilience, and finding your way through life's difficult moments, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing these stories to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I hope you found something in my story that speaks to your own life, your own struggles, your own journey. May you find the courage to make the hard choices, the wisdom to know when to fight and when to let go, and the peace that comes from knowing you did your best with what you knew at the time. Take care of yourselves and each other.